Thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm delighted to be here. So, this morning, 10 million citizens woke up in prisons around the world. 3,621 of those citizens woke up in Irish prisons. So that's the numbers. Now, that's a lot of people in prison in the world. It's a lot of people in prison in Ireland. 3,621 men and women in prison in Ireland, locked up, losing their freedom. It's a big number, and we have to do more about that. We have to do more about that number in getting it down, but I think we have to take a much more holistic approach to doing that. And I was delighted in 2014 when the IPRT did their report on travellers in prison, because it was a sort of a raising an awareness report. Following that report, Stephen's Green Trust came on board and took the initiative. They seized the initiative and said, we're going to do something about this. And they pushed us and pulled us into it. And that has to happen. Change is always about pushing and pulling and nudging forward all the time. Because no one group can do everything. No one agency can do everything. And the Irish Prison Service at the time, we had a massive agenda of overcrowding, of slopping out, of violence, of drugs, etc., etc., etc. So we need partners in the community, and I'm delighted that over the last number of years, there's been a real recognition that prison is community, community is prison, and that we have to stop this divide, and that your intervention with us and to us is so helpful and so engaging, and then ours in return to you. So I see this as us together, and that's why I'm so delighted that we have a partner like St. Stephen's Green Trust, who are, in a sense, hosting it for us all and pulling it together. Because there's so many good things going on in prison, and yet we need to make sure they're all happening together and in unison. The Traveller Prison Initiative is a real important beginning. It's a beginning only, and the program runs till the middle of next year. I think it's been a fantastic catalyst to actually highlight all the things that we've been talking about here today. The one thing that we talked a lot about this morning was the ethnic identifier, and that's a big issue for us in prison. We've tried it a few years ago to see if we could do it, and we didn't do well. Kathleen talked this morning about helping us to develop the question based on the census and training our staff and training our people in asking that question. And I just would say that people who come into prison, their first hour in prison in committal, it's a very daunting period for anybody coming into prison, and to be asked a whole range of questions can be very difficult, and you can see why a lot of people don't answer too many questions. So I think we do need to do that, and we have committed that we will have that ethnic identifier process that you saw on the screen this morning in place by the end of the year, and we're training, and Kathleen and others are helping us with that training to train people, our Red Cross volunteers. But also we have given a commitment that we need to find out scientifically how many people are in prison on a given day. And I certainly have given an undertaking to a number of people that we'll do that in the first half of next year. We'll actually conduct our own census on a given day and night and find out once and for all how many people identify as travellers within an Irish prison environment. And we're going to test that in Castlereagh, hopefully, and in the Docus early in January or February. And that means we have to ask everybody, as we heard, but we just can't ask people. We have to prepare to ask people. So we're going to need our educationalists, our psychologists, our probation officers, our prison officers. We're going to have to run an education campaign for maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and a build-up and a countdown. Here's why we want to ask you this question. Because we have to find a way of getting the maximum cooperation. So we have to lead up to it and then ask the question in a sensitive way, and we're getting help with that. And, let's admit it in this room. Some white settled people are worried about asking questions and worried about putting their foot in it and making mistakes. And we have to, if we accept that, and you all probably do accept that, so then we can get over that and actually get to the real agenda. So my commitment to you is that within the first half of next year, we will solidly know on a given day about how many people identify themselves as traveller people within the Irish prison environment. We will, of course, at the same time, be continuing to gather the electronic data, which will be dependent on people answering a committal, and maybe we need to come back to that at another time as well in the process. So that's a very important thing, because that then begins to out the problem. And I know those statistics that was given to you this morning in the room of 22% of women and 10-11% men. But that's just in this room. We need our researchers, we need our journalists, we need our politicians to be aware of those statistics, and then we need them to start taking responsibility for those statistics and actually putting in place an action plan. And we do have the possibility of influencing. We can influence, you can influence at all levels. But you need data. You need good information and good data. So we have the possibility of doing that, and we can push on from there. Certainly the Travellers in Women initiative and this report, I think it's really important. I think it's a very important piece of research done by Rachel. It tells the stories, and it was mentioned this morning, but I would really urge you to read the testimony of the women who spoke, because you didn't hear all of it today. And there is some very, very painful stuff in there about their experiences of the state and their experiences of state services. But I think it's better out than in. It's better published than not published. And I think there's a chance and a pathway for us to start making changes. And certainly Bridget's presentation earlier this afternoon, her 5 points of kind of reform is so important, because we need to hear that. We need to hear that feedback. I need to hear that. And Bridget hopefully can come back to us at some stage in the DOCAS or wider, and maybe have a wider conversation about some of those changes that we need to make. Because we have to be open to listening to the criticisms and the challenges that people feel that we have. And I certainly think that the Traveller Women project, it really highlights a phenomenal problem that we have in Irish society about how we incarcerate women in particular, allegedly for their safety. Allegedly for their safety. And it's not good enough, and we have to out it. You have to out it. We have to have a conversation about why do we do that? What is that all about? And of course, we have responses to that. I think the developmental stuff that's been under the direction of Anne here in the front over the last 2 years is great, because for me, it's one person is holding it through, coordinating it through for us all, because we all can't do it. And I think previous to 2 or 3 years ago, there was a bit of everything coming from everybody, and it's great from the Traveller Prisoner Initiative and Traveller Prison and Probation Initiative. Hopefully it should be renamed in the future. It's so important to have that. But education, we heard this morning, is the key. And I'm delighted that Stephen O'Connor and his teachers have actually taken up this mantle here in Dublin and appointed Traveller liaison teachers and actually taken responsibility for here's what we can do. Here's the bit we can do. I'm delighted that governors in Castlerea and in Wheatfield and in Mountjoy have said, here's the bit we can do. And when we put all those bits together, we can really make a difference. And the psychologist, Brendan O'Connor in Castlerea, has been doing a lot of outreach work with Galway and doing a lot of work with women and daughters of men who are in prison, and asking them why they're not accessing services, why they're not accessing psychology. And those women are able to encourage their men to come and access those. And that's the kind of stuff we have to be doing and we need to do for the future. We heard a lot about peer support this morning. I cannot emphasize the benefit of people taking their own power back and taking control of their direction and their future. For far too long, professionals like me claim that we change people's lives by doing it onto them. I don't believe that works anymore. I think it'll only work by people being supported to take control of their own lives, and peers and the Midlands Mediation Service and their interventions into Castlereagh is so powerful when men are helping men, traveller men are helping traveller men, to actually talk about really difficult issues, really stressful issues, really harmful things that they've done and things that they'd like to undo. And the power of that, and the power of mediation, and the power of peers taking control. And that's why I see that kind of program, the Red Cross initiative we have in the prison service, has been so powerful. It's about handing over the power. And we need, in the prison service, we need to do more and more and more. And that's about control. It's about handing over the control to actually allow people to start self-regulating within a prison environment. And that is possible, and that is something that I think is developmental, and it's for the future. So there's a lot for us to do. There's a huge program, and you look here at the recommendations to this report. It covers about 4 areas in particular, but we need to incrementally, I suppose, to answer that question that came up earlier, we need to incrementally improve the dialogue, the conversation. Like, I sat in that workshop in 2014 in a small room in Portlaoise, I think it was, or somewhere near Portlaoise. But little did I think we'd be sitting in Dublin Castle, 3 years later. So, if that can be achieved in 3 years, and the power in this room, and the power of taking back that control, and in terms of resources, obviously, it's obvious that this has to be maintained. It's kind of a no-brainer. Do you know what I mean? But I've discussed this with St. Stephen's Green Trust, and it's so important though that outside groups continue to maintain interest and to maintain a controlling interest in the development of future of prisons. You cannot leave it all to us. Because our priorities change and things go up and things go down. So it's going to be very important that we move together. We can influence, both Vivian and I, we do at the management board in the department, with the equality issue, the human rights issue. We can influence with TDs. And I think there's huge traction since that landmark sort of move in March of this year about recognising travellers. I think that has really helped put in a strong foundation. So I have no doubt that we need to mainstream these programs, but we need to do it in a coordinated way. We need to do it in a programmed way, so that when we come back in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, we can say, well, now what moves did we make since October 2017? So there's a big agenda. There is big challenges in prison still. We still have huge issues with drugs. We have some issues with violence. Mental health is still a big issue. So prison is still not a great place. It's not a good place for anybody to ever come to. But we can improve, and we can reduce the numbers in prison. And as we heard today, we can take responsibility for helping people transition from prison into the community. And then you have safer society and less victims. Thank you.